My son's text lit up my phone. You won't be joining us. My wife prefers it be just her family. The message landed like a cold stone in my chest. Tonight's before the long-awaited family vacation I had saved, planned, and dreamed about for 3 years. That was the message I got. I froze in my chair at the kitchen table, my reading glasses slipping down the bridge of my nose. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the still house. I had just finished tucking the last travel-sized bottles of sunscreen into carefully labeled zipper pouches, one for each grandchild. My fingertips were still tacky from tape after wrapping the small souvenir bags, each with a cane that read Aloha and Grandma loves you. Another buzz. Don't take it personally, Mom. It's just simpler this way. I didn't answer. I stared at the glowing screen until it went black, then set it face down on the table. No call, no thank you, not even the courtesy of a soft lie. Just a clean slice. I was no longer part of her family. Deep down, I had felt things shifting for a while. It wasn't just Tanya's habit of correcting me in front of the kids, or the way she rolled her eyes whenever I told a story from the early days. Like when James and I had honeymooned in Hawaii. It wasn't only the holidays she now hosted at her mother's house, telling me last minute. No, the real sign had been the way she looked past me. Not through me, but past me. Like a waitress who's already left the check on the table. Even so, I never believed Nathan would follow along. This was the son who once wrote Mother's Day cards that made me cry, who brought me pink tulips every March even after he'd moved states away. I still have the second grade drawing of me in a cape, captioned "My Mom Saves the Day." Apparently, that was no longer my role in his story. I glanced at the small duffel I'd packed for myself, 2 sundresses I hadn't worn in years, a photo of my late husband I'd planned to place on the dinner table for our night at the beach, and a lavender-scented candle, his favorite. I'd imagined us barefoot on the sand at sunset, lighting the candle together in his memory. I pictured my grandson's small hand in mine, asking, did Grandpa love the beach too? I would have told him. He loved it more because he shared it with me. But that scene would never happen now. I had paid for the beachfront villa, booked the flights, arranged the airport transfers, the luau, the snorkeling lessons, the breakfast baskets. I'd spent hours with the travel agent making sure the beds were soft enough for the kids, the walkways level enough for Tanya's mother's bad knee. Now I was reduced to a crossed outline on a budget sheet, the ATM that wired the funds and then vanished. I stayed at the kitchen table for a long time, the clock ticking toward midnight. Shadows stretched long across the counters I'd scrubbed earlier. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't feel anger. Not sadness. Not yet. Just shame. The kind that makes you feel foolish for holding onto hope. I considered calling him. I even picked up the phone. But what would I say? That hurt. He knew. You've changed. Of course he had. Please let me come. I couldn't beg. Not after everything. I set the phone down. Instead, I walked to the den and opened my old laptop. The screen blinked awake slowly, like it was stretching. I navigated to the folder labeled Hawaii Travel Fund. There it was, the total I'd been building toward since the day I retired, $21,763.84. It began with $10 bills tucked into envelopes. Then I sold old furniture. I took tutoring jobs online at night. Every penny had gone into this trip. I'd set up the travel account to pay the villa, airline tickets, and activities, all linked to my primary card, because I trusted them. The cursor blinked on the freeze account button. One click would stop all payments. A phone call could cancel every booking. But I didn't click. Not yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and started a new list. Not of my family. They had erased me from theirs. This was a different list. Women from church who'd never traveled out of state. My friend Carol, whose son stopped speaking to her after her cancer. Diagnosis: Louise, who buried her husband last fall but still brought his photo to Bible study. Frances, who raised her grandkids but wasn't invited to their graduations. Beverly, who once told me she'd never had a photo taken of her on the beach. I saved the file. Then I returned to the bank page. I clicked freeze account. A box popped up. Are you sure you want to pause all linked transactions? Yes. Another message. All linked cards will be disabled immediately. Yes. I shut the laptop and exhaled. I unwrapped the souvenir bags one by one, setting the trinkets on the table. And for the first time in 3 years, I let myself picture a different kind of trip. One where I wasn't unwanted, where I was the host, not the afterthought. It had all started with a jar, an old mason jar hidden behind the flower in my kitchen cabinet. I called it the dream jar, though no one knew it existed. Anytime I skipped buying something, vitamins, a movie rental, new house shoes, I'd slip the saved cash into the jar. $5 here, 10 there. Over time, it grew, quietly, like hope does. For 3 years I saved. I canceled cable, stopped buying my favorite tea, took on tutoring even when my eyes burned. I turned down the heat and wore double socks. I said no to lunch dates, telling friends, it's a tight month. They didn't know why. It wasn't just about Hawaii. It was about a promise I made to myself after James died. I'd take the whole family to the place where we began. I'd let the grandkids see the ocean he loved. I thought maybe it would bring Nathan back to where he came from, to who loved him first. So I planned. I chose a villa big enough for all 9 of us. I called the agent again and again to discuss bed arrangements, diet needs, wheelchair access. I ordered matching t-shirts with "Family is Forever 2023" on the front. I pictured us gathered at the fire pit, candles in hand, each saying a word about James. I imagined tears, laughter, and, most of all, gratitude. But the truth was, I'd been disappearing from the picture for years. What's the most hurtful thing anyone has ever said to you? Let me guess. It was unexpected. It was personal. It cut deep. But I bet it wasn't as painful as the message woven between the lines of this email. Hi, I'm a recovering people pleaser and author of the best-selling book, How to Set Boundaries. When to say yes, when to say no. To say no. Today's message comes from a viewer named Annan. My son and daughter-in-law had originally planned a big family trip for 8 of us to Hawaii for spring break. They had the details all organized over a year in advance. However, they couldn't afford it anymore and asked if I would cover the cost since I had extra money. Saved up, of course. They'd already made non-refundable bookings. I said sure. Several months later, they told me that the total amount would be $33,000. I asked if I could get a copy of the receipts, and they provided a list of the bills. I noticed that the plane tickets and car rental showed my credit card and everything else was charged to theirs. I asked if they could run the balance of the bills through my card as well, and they said, that's okay. We'll pay the rest of it later. And I did nothing of the sort. I put up a boundary that I would only pay for things that were confirmed in my name. So they got the car rental and plane tickets changed to my name. But the rest of the trip was still on their card. A few weeks before departure, I asked if everything was ready and what I needed to do. Daughter-in-law replied that they still hadn't paid for the hotel rooms or any of the excursions, and asked if I could cover all those costs too. I said no and explained that I wasn't comfortable paying for things I hadn't seen yet, and I wanted to keep my liability to what I had already paid. She got mad, called me selfish, and accused me of sabotaging their trip. Ivy tried explaining that I had put up a boundary and that if they stuck to the original plan and used their own card, this wouldn't have happened. But she won't hear it. They both will be out of town for a week, which is fine by me. But I haven't heard from them into weeks. So what do you think? What's the message hidden between the lines? I think it's this: Mom, we didn't care about saving for this trip. We didn't budget for it. We didn't make sacrifices for it. We saw a big expense and assumed that you would pay for it. We said we'd pay you back, but really we didn't expect to. In fact, we expected you to pay for more than we planned out. Why? Because that's what you've done before. You've covered expenses. You've bailed us out. You've cleaned up our messes. And we knew you would again. We never thought this would happen, that you'd say no. So now you're ruining our plans. Now, notice that nobody ever asks someone they don't need to from someone who doesn't give them that kind of power. Nobody asks a person they aren't dependent on for money. And yet, just like the woman in the video, we enable these kinds of requests. Why? Because they know we won't say no, so they don't even ask. We automatically assume that we're responsible for their happiness, for their success, for their messes, and that responsibility is not ours. Now, you might be thinking, but I want to help them. I want them to be happy. Yes, you do. And how do you help others achieve their goals? By enabling them, by supporting them through consequences, by sacrificing your dreams for theirs. You may think you're helping, but you're hindering. You're robbing them of learning to take responsibility, and then you're hating yourself for giving up your own life for theirs. So why does it hurt so much to say no? First, we fear losing our relationship. We think they won't love us. If we don't do this, they won't value us. And I know that might be true in this situation, but the kind of relationship wasn't worth having in the first place. Second, we feel guilty. If we don't do what they want, they won't get to go on the trip. And who wants to be responsible for crushing someone's dream? But maybe that's where the dream belongs, and crushed. I realize that sounds cold, but sometimes a dream is crushing us. Sometimes a dream isn't meant to be fulfilled. Third, we worry about what other people will think. If they ask, "Oh, why didn't you go?" I'll say, "Well, I did, but they couldn't afford it." And fourth, we're tired of being the hero, the rescuer. We're burnt out. So instead of telling them no, we give them what they want, but this time we add conditions. This time we draw a line. We save the trip, but we don't pay for any more than we already have. In this scenario, the woman had already covered the bulk of the trip. The plane tickets, the rental car. Why pay any more? Because it feels like helping, and it is helping. It helps her children remain helpless. It helps them remain irresponsible. It helps them remain incompetent. And when you do that, you're robbing them of learning how to live. So what's the solution? Draw the line. Say no, even if they stop asking. Even if you feel guilty. Even if you worry about what others will think. Even if you're tired of being the hero. Even if you're worried about your relationship. Even if you fear losing them. Say no. Give them the space to struggle, to fail, to learn, to grow. Your job is not to fix their life. Your job is to love your children enough to let them fail. Failure is where growth is. Failure is where character is built. So what do you say? I love you, and I'm willing to contribute financially to this trip, but that's all I'm able to do. Now it's up to you to make it work. But what if they lose the reservation? What if they can't go? Then they'll understand that what they truly lost was the opportunity to grow. They'll see that you're right. They'll appreciate you more. And if they don't, then you'll know they aren't worth your sacrifice. You'll know the kind of relationship wasn't worth having in the first place. The hardest part of any kind of recovery is forgiving ourselves. If we've been raised to people please, if we've been raised to say yes, if we've been raised to put others first, we spend our lives beating ourselves up. We beat ourselves up for putting others first. We beat ourselves up for saying yes when we wanted to say no. We beat ourselves up for feeling the way we do. But I am here to tell you that you cannot start no until you stop beating yourself up for starting no. And this is a promise. When you start no, you will start to like yourself better. When you start no, you will start to respect yourself more. When you start no, you will feel better. When you start no, you will feel proud. And pride changes everything. It's the difference between living in shame and living in peace. Next week's video will be answered by Dr. Ramani Durvasula. I'll be back with a new video the following week. Until then, remember to show up for yourself. You deserve it. What an excellent read. It's really well written. It's tense. It keeps you engaged. And what a story. It's powerful, isn't it? Yes. Well, thank you so much. It means a lot coming from you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, me too. Let's talk about it. So what made the story stick with you? What do you think? Oh, gosh. Well, I mean, the writing is so good, right? Like the reader gets to experience the feelings of humiliation and frustration and sadness that the protagonist goes through. The story is told from her point of view, and the author uses very descriptive language. You can tell exactly how she feels. And let's be honest, who hasn't dealt with ungrateful people in their lives? We've all had experiences where we've made plans or sacrifices only to be taken for granted. Or worse. This story taps into those feelings. Absolutely. Well said. And also, I love that you mentioned the writing because that's actually what the story is about, right? The main character is a writer. She's a blogger. And it's interesting to see how she processes all these emotions through her writing. Her whole world revolves around words. And I love how the author uses language to show us how the main character is feeling. Also, have you noticed that the story is sort of like a reflection of the societal issue of family roles and expectations? How do we balance traditional gender roles with personal growth and satisfaction? Oh, yeah, definitely. The story challenges these traditional roles and shows the consequences of doing so. It makes us ask questions like, should a woman sacrifice her happiness for her family or career? And does personal fulfillment require breaking societal norms? But I think it's more than that. I think it's also about the choices women make. Do they choose to conform to societal pressures, or do they choose to forge their own path? Very true. Well said. So can you think of any other aspects of the story that are worth discussing? Well, sure. I mean, obviously. The story is a great example of showing the importance of communication in relationships. If only the characters had talked to each other and expressed their feelings and needs, things could have been very different. You know what I mean, of course. I mean, honestly, most of the problems in the story arise from a lack of communication. The main character doesn't speak up about her needs or feelings, and the other characters don't try to understand her perspective either. It's a classic case of if only they had talked to each other. And what about the symbolism? The author uses some really interesting symbols throughout the story. The ocean, for instance. Well, yes, of course. The ocean plays a big role in the story. It symbolizes freedom and adventure, but it also represents the vastness and complexity of the human experience. The ocean is both beautiful and dangerous, just like life. And the characters have to learn to navigate both the beauty and danger of their relationships and choices. The ocean becomes this metaphor for the emotional journey the main character goes through. The vastness mirrors her feelings of being overwhelmed, and the calmness of the sea reflects moments of peace she finds in nature. The author really uses the ocean to enrich the story. It's not just a backdrop. Beautifully put. Thank you. So as we wrap up our discussion about, this incredible story, do you have any final thoughts? Well, the story has stayed with me because it's about more than just a family vacation. It's about a woman searching for her place in the world, trying to balance tradition with change and looking for love and understanding along the way. It's about accepting ourselves and those around us, embracing the unexpected and finding strength within ourselves. It's such a relatable journey. Thank you so much for joining me today. I truly appreciate your insights. I'm glad you found the story as engaging as I did. Keep reading, keep thinking, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now. They weren't reaching for reconciliation. They were reaching for a refund. The word deposit made me almost smile, as if they'd invested anything but certainty that I would foot the bill. I opened my sent transactions to be sure. Every charge was mine. Every reservation, mine. There was no shared account, no joint contribution, just me. Mothers are expected to absorb the insult and pay the check, hold the hurt and hand over the blessing, get cut from the photo but still buy the frame. I closed my eyes and pictured the dining table in Hawaii. 6 women, passing bread, clinking glasses, laughing the kind of laughter that doesn't need an audience. James in the center, smiling from his walnut frame. No one demanding I prove my value in order to sit down. Then I looked back at Nathan's email. No real apology, just a list of excuses and a softened request for money. Understanding doesn't mean surrender. Love without respect is not love at all. I hovered over reply, then closed the message. If someone needs you to explain why you won't bankroll betrayal, they never deserved your explanation. I shut the laptop, poured myself iced tea, and stared out the window. A bird skimmed the yard and brushed the wind chime James bought for our 35th anniversary. It sang a light, bright note. I found myself smiling. I hadn't received a true apology, but I didn't need one. I had something better, clarity, and I had kept what was mine. Later, I sat on the beach, toes buried in warm sand, watching the tide breathe in and out. The sky blushed postcard pink. Behind me, the villa murmured with contented voices. Women laughing not for show, but from somewhere healed. Frances told a story about boarding the wrong bus and ending up 3 towns from her own wedding rehearsal. Carol tried to teach Beverly a hula step, a flower tucked behind her ear. Dory hummed an old lullaby. Nora wrote a postcard to herself, addressed to a mailbox that hadn't held her name in years. I watched them and thought, this is family when there's nothing to perform. Just presence, just joy. Just permission to be. It took me a long time to learn that love isn't loud. It's consistent. It's showing up. It's choosing someone after they stop being convenient. That evening we gathered on the patio. I took out the last lavender candle. 6 others were already burned down, 1 for each night, each lit by a different woman who spoke a name or a memory that had never been given space. Now it was my turn. I set James's photo at the center. The chatter softened to a hush. I held a match. This, I said quietly, was supposed to be for them, for all of my family. Maybe it was always meant for this. I struck the match. Flame leapt, then steadied. I lit the wick. The scent of lavender lifted into the night like a benediction. Beverly's hand found mine. I didn't think I'd feel this again. She whispered, peace, gratitude, like I matter. She blinked hard and laughed softly at herself. And I didn't think it would come from someone like you. Someone like me. I smiled. Someone who knows, she said, what it's like to give everything and still be left outside the door. I didn't answer. I just squeezed her fingers. After the flame had pulled the first circle of wax, we carried what we'd brought to the shore. A line of women moving slowly barefoot, each holding a seashell or a ribbon or a folded slip of paper with a single name. No speeches, no scripts, just a circle in the sand, the ocean breathing close. I'm not sad anymore, I said, not to them, or even to James, but to the part of me that had needed to believe sorrow was the only proof I had loved well. And it was true. I wasn't angry either. I wasn't waiting for Nathan to call, or for Tanya to wake up to the shape of what she'd done. I wasn't craving a scene in which everyone finally understood how much I had carried. I had put it down. For the first time in decades, I felt light. I thought about that email, about the tidy attempt to turn remorse into negotiation. I thought about the years I kept trying to be enough for people who only saw me when they needed something. I smiled, not the polite smile of paper plates and no room at the big table, but the kind that comes when you finally see the truth. You were never the problem. You were simply offering your best to people who had decided it wasn't valuable. The words arrived like the tide arriving on its own schedule. Kindness breeds entitlement. When it isn't to you respected, I had stopped mistaking acquiescence for kindness. I had stopped paying for my own erasure. I owed no one anything, not out of bitterness, but out of freedom. Freedom from expectations that only ever drained me. Freedom from the weight of performing a kind of motherhood that required constant sacrifice and called it love while never offering respect. At the shoreline, the waves tugged at the sand around our feet as if to say, let it go. So I did. I released the fantasy of a family that would always make room for me. I released the ache of a house I helped build but was never invited to inhabit. I released the endless reaching for approval I'd already earned 1,000 different ways. What remained was simple and solid: a handful of women, a warm-lit villa, a husband's smile fixed forever in a frame, and a heart that had stopped begging to be seen. I turned to the women, my chosen family, and felt a steadiness that didn't waver. I had not been left behind. I had, at last, fallen into step with those walking my way. If this story touched the place in you that still waits by a phone, or still buys the matching sweaters, or still hopes a text might say the words you deserve, then you belong here. This is Grandma True Stories, where silence becomes strength and memory becomes power. We tell the stories others avoid, mothers discarded, women who endured, legacies rebuilt without noise but with truth. If you believe kindness is not weakness but wisdom that waits, if you know being forgotten is not the end of your story, but the start of a better one, subscribe to Grandma True Stories today. Because when a grandma speaks, the world finally learns how to listen.